Over 20 years career, there's been quite a few, but I guess the one that recently stands out would be last spring, when many of us were forced to go remote due to COVID. And so being in the classroom for 20 years in front of students and now being forced to go remote was something that was difficult to deal with. So I chose to instead rise to the occasion and make it something that the students could remember, because I wanted to make sure that students had something positive to remember from this time period. So what I decided to do was to take our project-based learning approach and make it virtual and remote. And so I started doing projects where I incorporated the work of Inspired Citizens, and I had special guests come on, and I was piloting a few of the new ideas that Inspired Citizens was planning to launch through Global Youth Media. And it was a smashing success. We did Debate for Impact, which was really fun. We got to invite some guests from around the world, actually, to be some of our panelists. We also did some work with our musical podcast, and we got to have some musicians come in. We also did some deep work with documentary making, and we had some of the documentary people that were the producers, like David Fidel, who came in to give our students some inspiration as to making their own documentaries. And so the whole experience was phenomenal, and it was terrific. And I'm so glad that I took that chance, because I didn't want them to remember remote learning as something that was boring and something that they could take with them to the next school year.
Yeah, it sounds like you weren't really in the trenches that long because you made the best of that remote learning situation, even though you're kind of thrust into it after being in the classroom so long. I mean, all these experiences that your students gained really opened their eyes to the world, correct?
Yeah, it really did. And it really gave them that that global connection piece, which is something that I've always aspired to, which is to be a global educator. And so I wanted to use the opportunity that we had in front of us of using technology to be able to connect students around the world. And that ultimately led me to where I am today.
So in the pre-chat, we had Steve Sostak on, and he's the director of a
SDG number 2, which is no hunger or zero hunger. But anyone who's worked with the Sustainable Development Goals know that they all kind of integrate. And so you don't just talk about them in isolation, but we did focus on food security. And what was amazing about that is that we had 6 different countries involved, and we were able to have students have conversations about what does food security look like in your local community. And then they went ahead and created podcasts that were telling the stories of people that were dealing with food security locally in their own communities. But it gave the students the opportunity to meet with experts like nutritionists and things like that, that they could talk about food and what does hunger look like, and what does crops and farming look like in your own local community.
What countries were involved in that project?
That one was Korea and China and Africa, the United States, and I believe the other one, I'm sorry, I'm thinking, oh, Honduras. And so for that particular project, the one that I am currently doing is more focused on literacy. And so what we are doing is we are focusing on people that overcome challenges, and we are reading 3 different mentor texts. They're included in grades 4 through 12. And so we're reading 3 different books. One is A Long Walk to Water. One is The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And the third one is Call Me American, depending on the grade level. And all of these stories tell stories of people that are overcoming challenges. And so we have students involved from all 6 continents, and we have 20 different classrooms involved. It's been really phenomenal to see these students come together. I had a meeting just last week with 165 students on it, and they were all collaborating and talking about the book and the mentor text and people that are overcoming challenges. And we're going to be looking forward to them creating some media for impact. They have a choice of how they'd like to tell the story, but they're going to find someone either in their local community or even in their own family that has overcome a challenge.
Nice, kind of tying that story from the novel into their own personal life.
Yes, and we actually have the opportunity to meet one of the authors next week. He's going to come in and had the opportunity through Inspire Citizens to work with some first grade classrooms.
Mhm.
And I just love their enthusiasm. I taught first grade for a really long time.
Mhm.
And so, I know a lot of teachers think that, first graders can't do something like a digital storybook, but I believe they can. And I'm excited about the opportunity to get them involved.
Mhm. And is there, for these younger students, is there somewhat of a language barrier, or do they speak English well enough that they're able to conduct and have the project in English with these peers from other countries?
We have not encountered any type of language barrier.
Mhm.
Most of the schools, actually all of the schools, speak English, and so it hasn't been a problem as of yet. However, we are always equipped to be able to make it accessible so that students who don't speak English are also able to participate.
Great. I wanted to talk a little bit about ethical journalism and navigating students through ethics when you're looking at doing projects and kind of types of, empathy projects, for example, and, tying that in with digital citizenship.
Yeah, so we focus on ethical journalism. So teaching students that they need to do their thorough research and need to make sure that they're telling the story not just from one perspective. Also, just teaching them the importance of researching their materials and making sure that their materials um, are valid and trackable.
Mhm.
We also do a lot with digital citizenship. We work closely with ISTE standards, and so we incorporate them as well as the teaching tolerance standards into our teaching. And so we make sure that students go back to looking at those standards when they are doing any type of research material online.
Yeah, and I use a lot of teaching tolerance material as well because it has so much about global citizenship and about just things in the news that we need to be more aware of. So, are your students then, when they go into these breakout sessions, for example, do they do any type of like peer editing or share each other's work to kind of like evaluate as peers if some of their research is thorough or if they're they've used sites that are valid information.
Well, we haven't done the peer editing as yet on a global scale. However, they
Mhm.
are doing that inside their classroom. We also
Okay.
work with Soundtrap for Education, and
Okay.
we use that as primarily as our podcasting right now. And so, what's great about that is that it creates a small classroom online where students within that classroom can listen to the other students' podcasts and give them critical feedback, so they can go
Okay.
back in and edit it. And then my plan is to, at the end of the culminating part of this unit, is to have a global meetup where the students can share their final products, and so they can give each other feedback there as well.
Yeah, that's so important. And, the fact that I've used Soundtrap as well with collaboration, and it's such a great tool. And they're, providing a lot of just fun things for students to work on this year. But yeah, the fact that you're using it kind of in that peer editing sense, I think is it's a great way because if the time zones don't fit, then they can at least listen to that recording and give them feedback that way. Um, so today on the podcast, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask, out of everything we talked about today, what's one thing in particular you want listeners to remember? Do you have a particular quote that you live by?
Yes, I think I'm going to go with one of my favorite quotes from Jimmy Iovine, and that is to make fear a tailwind instead of a headwind. And so I always tell students that, the best way to get to know something is to really just dive in and don't be afraid. And I also just want to encourage teachers and students out there that Inspire Citizens is here to help, and we would love to encourage you to join some of our global collaborative projects, because we are here to help you, and students really enjoy and are so engaged in these. I just can't say it enough that I hope that we can encourage some more teachers to join us, because it really is just so fantastic for students. I've just seen the joy it's brought them, and even from parents. I've gotten some messages from parents through social media, from parents from India and Australia that we're working with, just saying that they really enjoy the wonderful work that we're doing.
Well,